we're proud of ourselves, and we're not gonna go down. If you wanna come in here and tell us what to do, we're gonna throw your ass out. And if you stop that, we're gonna kill you. I'm pulling my knife out and I'm fighting to the death. They wanna fight, they'll get one.
There is a very common trope of left-wingers supporting the bad guys in horror films. Champagne socialists almost comically support horror villains. The very easy way of psychologizing this reoccurring trope is that self-loathing lefties have a pathological fetish for the unknown, of the political other in the Carl Schmitt friend-enemy distinction, and that is where Spandrel's concept of bio-Leninism comes in. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and I need to quit editorializing and inserting ad hominems into my videos. Let's go over a bunch of YouTube case studies. Sargon of Akkad recently posted a video in which he reacted to an old Guardian article. This article questions the validity that, in Lord of the Rings, Sauron, the evil eye in the evil Black Fortress, commanding the evil army of evil forest-burning, human-genociding orcs, may have actually been the good guys, or at least, in the very least, their side should have been heard out. To quote the Guardian, "We're left to take on trust from Gandalf, a manipulative spin doctor, and the elves, immortal elitists who kill humans and hobbits for even entering their territory, when they say that the maker of the One Ring is evil. Isn't it more likely that the orcs, who live in dire poverty, actually support Sauron because he represents the liberal forces of science and industrialization in the face of a brutally oppressive conservative social order? The evil wizard Saruman cut down the ancient Fangorn forest to industrialize and support the churning engines of war." Tolkien was a romantic. He did not see the destruction of nature in support of consumer goods as a harmonious state of the world. It isn't the orcs' fault that they were born into poverty. The hobbits, the innocent lovers of all that is simple and good, are actually shady propagandists. The writer of this article cannot accept in good faith that there is an idealized concept of the good and simple life that is not modern and progressive. All various concepts of the good must be purged. The harsh realities of the feudal era Tolkien took inspiration from realistically could not embrace luxury space communism as a ruling ideology. I wonder why. The 8th century vision of a good life and of the good king that Tolkien depicts triumphing over evil does not mesh with the 21st century vision of limousine liberals, so it must be stamped out. The same Marxists at Zero Books that complain about the Enclosure Acts and the rise of property rights simultaneously will not accept that the feudal organization of things might have been better. Maybe life on a picturesque rural farm might have actually been better than factory life in Victorian London. The jury is still out on that question. Academic Agent has made a very convincing empirical case that things got better with industrialization and that Charles Dickens is just a smear merchant. But I digress. Similar to the reaction against Tolkien, ContraPoints embraces the Warhammer 40k chaos god Slaanesh. The demonic embodiment of corrupting hedonistic pleasures is embraced by the YouTube Neon Drag Tranny. On Twitter, she owns up to her similarities to Slaanesh and says, quote, "We've all been so focused on the Demonette of Slaanesh that I haven't even taken time to appreciate what a great phrase enemy of the Imperium is," unquote. And a commenter below her responded with, quote, "The Imperium is the most fascist entity in all of fiction. Being on its bad side is the right place to be," unquote. Alright, so let's do a synopsis of the Warhammer 40k universe. Humanity operates a galaxy-spanning, nightmarish empire in which humanity is bombarded with the most terrifying eldritch horrors you could find on an 80s heavy metal album. There are trillions of people worshipping the undead corpse of the God Emperor of humanity. Most people live miserable lives, slaving away in factories doing tedious work to fight the incomprehensible hordes of space nightmares. But humanity is still alive. You cannot have space communism when everything wants to eat, kill, or literally rape torture you in the case of the Dark Eldar. It is ignorant to complain about totalitarian space fascism given the nature of the universe, and it would be pathological for people to support the space demons that want to destroy the remnants of humanity's once glorious empire. The specific demon god ContraPoints audience identifies with, was created when the last galaxy-spanning empire became hedonistic and decadent to an extreme degree. The Eldar literally willed into existence a demon god with the extreme excesses of pain and pleasure they were experiencing. Like ContraPoints, PhilosophyTube literally dresses up as the devil in order to push his personal philosophy of hedonism. To him, the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain with regards to the individual ego is the correct way to orient one's self. Just as Satan rebels against the tyranny of God in Paradise Lost, PhilosophyTube revolts against any concept of higher ideals beyond the self. Does God exist? ContraPoints and PhilosophyTube would say no. Does virtue exist? They would probably say no to that concept as well. Does evil exist? I'm sure they would say no, because evil that comes from humans is purely circumstantial. However, they have no concept of the good beyond pleasure. Where does that leave the serial killer seeking their subjective pleasure? That leaves us with H. Bomber Guy's concept of evil. In his video on H.P. Lovecraft, H. Bomber Guy describes the evolution of his interpretation of Lovecraft and tries to offer advice on how to update Lovecraft for a modern audience. Normally, Lovecraftian horror is the existential dread of an uncaring, malevolent force beyond our comprehension or control coming to get us. We are at an age beyond Lovecraftian horror, he claims. He describes his personal experience watching the 2007 film Cthulhu before and after he accepted his homosexuality. He originally dismissed the adaptation of Lovecraft's The Shadow over Ismith. The film does not focus on the monsters or evil cult, but instead takes a look at the little human horrors. The discrimination a gay man faces from his family. It was his realization that discrimination is the modern Lovecraftian horror. He suggests that the 21st century must get away from Lovecraft's racism and anti-Semitism and instead focus on embracing and learning from the other. He then goes on to his analysis of The Shape of Water. Quote, "The Shape of Water's story gets at what I think makes Lovecraft actually work in the first place. Human stories about our alienation from each other and our lonelinesses, our victimization by forces beyond our control that see us as outside the norm, and how we can at least partially rectify this by learning to see the beauty in something previously seen as alien. In a sense, it's a story about the people of Innsmouth who happily choose to join with the Deep Ones." Unquote. The people of Innsmouth are an evil cult that worship a demonic entity and procreate with fish people called the Deep Ones. These people commit horrific crimes against nature, and H. Bomber Guy validates their worldview. No, bestiality is wrong, worshipping demons is wrong, sacrificing innocents to appease a demon is wrong. In this case, there is a very valid reason to banish the other. It's not like he doesn't otherize people. H. Bomber Guy otherizes people that say he is the other. He says it himself that modern horrors are homophobia, racism, sexism, and classism. Those concepts and the people that embody them are demonic entities that need to be banished in a reactionary manner. H. Bomber Guy turns traditional fear of the other on its head. Instead of fearing the outsider, one fears one's own community in a paranoid witch hunt. As Lindsay Ellis points out in her video, My Monster Boyfriend, monsters from the advent of cinema onward have embodied the social others of the time. From Birth of a Nation to King Kong to Creature from the Black Lagoon, the other is usually a stand-in for African Americans in the American context. But then, somewhere in the 60s and 70s, there was a shift. She cites films like Young Frankenstein and plays like Phantom of the Opera that broke the ice, humanized the other, and paved the way for the bestiality of The Shape of Water. One can only imagine what happened in the 60s and 70s. Cough, cough. The sexual revolution, desegregation, the civil rights movement, and women's liberation. Cough, cough. Anyway, the sexual revolution also opened up another venue for leftists to talk about horror. Cuck philosophy uses the movie Hellraiser and its director, Clive Barker, to deconstruct horror movie tropes. Instead of the malevolently violent evil entities, the extra-dimensional Cenobites are in search of limit experiences. They go around and torture people and themselves in order to find the ultimate limit experience. You see, the terror of experiencing pain is excruciatingly horrible, and at the same time, it is viscerally pleasurable. Events of both extreme pleasure and pain max out one's physical ability to experience the world, and sometimes one confuses pleasure for pain and vice versa. There are no great Lovecraftian evils out there. There are only limit experiences. That is fundamentally what encounters with the divine are. Wrong. There is more to life than pleasure and pain. The fundamental ethical framework is not pleasure and pain, but virtue and vice, as described by Thomas Aquinas. There is transcendent value beyond the hedonic. Virtue ethics, metaphysics, and God all exist, and when you abandon them, you start worshipping Slanesh like ContraPoints, mimicking the devil like PhilosophyTube, accepting the demonic cultists and bestiality like H. Bomber Guy, and embracing the world of the Cenobites like Cuck Philosophy. That is not the right way to live. The way they think will not lead to a fulfilling or healthy life. But why would a gay man create a movie about BDSM like Hellraiser? Why would an immigrant like Guillermo del Toro create a movie about embracing bestiality and shunning the straight white patriarchy? Why did Twitter turn Pennywise the Clown and the Babadook into gay rights icons? It's bio-Leninism, and we're almost at the point. For a brief period of time, Pennywise the Clown, a child-eating Lovecraftian alien demon, became a symbol for the LGBTQ community. It was quite a shock when the second movie came out and Pennywise committed a hate crime. It turns out that the book It starts with Pennywise tormenting and eating a gay guy. There's also the Babadook. It's a terrifying movie and it's a great watch, but here's the spoiler-free summary. A father dies, leaving his wife and spoiled, bratty, borderline autistic son alone. The son torments the mother and reminds her of her lost love until she eventually considers killing her own child. The Babadook represents the pathologies we all let into our lives that either torment us into committing heinous acts or the host overcomes the pathologies. The Babadook is the embodiment of suicidal thoughts, existential feelings of worthlessness, and thoughts of homicide. Once you realize that you can do these terrible things, you've let in the Babadook. The Babadook is a gay rights icon. Why? The obvious answer is that both movie villains are anti-children and want to tear families apart. The Babadook and Pennywise are part of the coalition of the dispossessed. Spandrel calls the modern phenomenon bio-Leninism. Spandrel's theory goes as follows. Originally, Leninism promised political power to dispossessed peasants through a class war. Well, it wasn't just the economically dispossessed. They were the communities of vulnerability, murderers, sexual deviants, and other dregs of society. The dispossessed will be offered power and opportunities that they would have never been able to gain under the old regime. There is no incentive to support the old regime beyond a conservative false consciousness to support the corrupt hierarchy that has abandoned them. What does the old regime have to offer the dispossessed as bribes? Nothing. No higher offices or opportunities to advance. In a healthy society, there are two elements that really matter. That society must make loyalty more important than meritocracy, and the spiteful dispossessed must not be able to hold political power. Leninism flips this on its head. The pathological murderers and jealous poor must hold the reins of power and establish a technocratic dictatorship of the proletariat. What Lenin failed to imagine is that economics is not the only way to secure the loyalty of the communities of vulnerability. What was once dismissed by Marx and Lenin, the lumpen proletariat and petty bourgeois, turned out to be the two groups that were best at taking down the old hierarchical forms of social structures. While the economics of the USSR failed, bio-Leninism took root in the Western world. The underprivileged were able to successfully overtake the privileged in all of the bureaucratic institutions. The tyranny of intersectional bugmen is upon us. The more oppressed the group was under the old regime, the more opportunities the bio-Leninist regime offers them. What are the gays, religious and ethnic minorities, and women offered under the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant patriarchy? Relative stability but no goods to loot. Hedonism and individualism are perfect ideological breeding grounds for people low in conscientiousness and high in openness. Why act virtuously or selflessly when my personal philosophy tells me to maximize my pleasure and minimize my pain? Virtue ethics is dumb. I'm just going to let you other people bear the load of my poor decisions or the poor circumstances that I do not want to bear or share. You can quickly see that the Democratic Party is quickly becoming the bio-Leninist intersectionality party. In the book Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, it was the weak-willed runts and outcasts that were the first converts to Christianity and the ones who aided the British colonize Nigeria and tear down the corrupt and already failing dismantling traditional power structures. But Clossington, what does any of this have to do with the left's sympathy for horror villains? It has everything to do with horror villains. Good horror villains embody real and or perceived terrors that threaten the normal. Old horror movie villains represent the threats to a healthy society. These old threats are usually the embodiment of the demographics the bio-Leninists are attempting to appeal to. Lord of the Rings reflects the historical fears of the 8th century British fending off Viking invasions. The Warhammer 40k villains attempt to tear down the corrupt traditional empire of mankind. Lovecraftian villains are the cosmic other coming to wreck everything. The old monsters represented threatening sexual and demographic threats. Of course, the bio-Leninists support tearing down traditional structures and lowering society's defenses against the other. When the French Revolution tore down the Ancien regime, Marquis de Sade was granted offices of power in order to wipe out traditional morality. These bio-Leninists are no different.